Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Crime and Punishment story. This week I am covering the very sad story of Mary Stockdale and the murder of Robert Stockdale, which took place in Sunderland in 1889. I hope you will find it interesting. Now, I just want to add a thank you here for all the support I received for the recent loss of my dad. And although I did have new videos published last week, they were all written and recorded before the loss of my dad. So I was not able to thank everyone for their kind words on those videos. So I wanted to do it now. The past lives of those involved in this week's case is quite basic, and as Robert was only a child, I have included his information along with that of his mother, Mary. Mary Elizabeth Stockdale was born in around 1863 in Sunderland to parents George and Mary. She worked as a domestic servant in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Hunter. In around 1887, Mary, who was not married, gave birth to a child called Robert. After his birth, he was given to a lady by the name of Mrs. Graham to take care of. However, he was later removed by Mary and given into the care of Mrs. Cook, who lived close to where Mary worked. Mary then paid her for his keep. However, this would have left her with little to no money for herself. Mary was described as being of low intellect and often described in the papers of the time as being soft-headed. A strange description, but this was very common for the time. It was said that she was not able to learn, and that although Mrs. Hunter had tried to teach her how to read and write, Mary had been unable to do so. Many people said she acted foolishly and would often do jobs around the house that did not need to be done. Before we go any further, can I just say, if you do find this video interesting, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. It really is very much appreciated. And it is completely free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money, but it really does help to support the channel. And I would just like to add, as I always do, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify, so I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. On the night of February the 3rd, 1889, Mary asked if she may leave her work to go and visit her child. Mrs. Hunter told her she could, but she must return quickly as she had work still to do. She did not visit her son very often and usually only went when her work was finished. Mary went to the home of Mrs. Cook in Sunderland, and after chatting to her briefly, she told her that she had come to take the child away, telling her that Robert was going to a good home. Mrs. Cook was not happy with this, as it was a cold, stormy night, but Mary insisted she must take Robert with her then. Mrs. Cook finally agreed, and Mary left a short time later, taking Robert with her. At around 7:45 p.m, Mary returned to the home of Mr. and Mrs. Hunter. She did not have Robert with her, and she did not mention him to Mrs. Hunter, and simply went about her duties as usual. The following morning, the body of a young child was found in the pond of Richardson's Mill in Sunderland. Although it's not explained how the child was identified, it seems that the first suspect was Mary Stockdale, and Inspector Carter went to the home of Mr. and Mrs. Hunter and asked Mary to come to the police station with him. He later charged her with causing the death of her child, to which she replied yes, and then began to cry. The inquest was held at the West End Police Station in Sunderland before Coroner Maynard. Elizabeth Cook of Sunderland said she had identified the body as being that of Robert Stockdale, who was 14 months old, and Mary Stockdale was his mother. Elizabeth said she had been taking care of Robert since he had been around 5 weeks old. She said Mary had asked Mrs. Graham to bring him to her, and the following day Mary had visited, and they had agreed that she would pay 2 shillings and 6pence for the child's keep, and that she would also provide her with a pint of milk each day. She said Mary paid on a regular basis and visited the child now and then, although she did not come that often. She said that sometime in 1888 Mary had visited her home in the company of Mrs. Graham. She had told her that she would sell Robert if she was able to. She said Mary also told her that a farmer in Sunderland was looking for a child to adopt, but Mary was not able to find him. Elizabeth said she thought Mary was a heartless mother to want to sell her own child. Elizabeth said on the night of February the 2nd she had gone to see Mary for her weekly money, and Mary paid her without any issue. She spoke to her, saying it had been a long time since she had been to see Robert, but she did not reply. However, the following night she came to see him. She said they talked for a while, then Mary said, "I have come for the child." Elizabeth asked her where she planned to take him, telling her it was not good to take him out on such a stormy night, and Mary told her, "I must take him tonight. He is going to a good home." Elizabeth said she dressed him and Mary took him with her. She did not see him again until after he had been found in the pond. When asked, Elizabeth said she did not think Mary cared much for Robert, but she did not see him treated badly by his mother. She had insured him just the week before his death and had made one payment. She said on the night of the 3rd, when Mary came to her house, she was not behaving strangely, and she had no reason to believe that Robert was in danger. Joseph Cook of Sunderland said he was the husband of Elizabeth, and he said he had been present when Mary left with Robert. He said he had asked her to leave him with them until the following morning, but he said Mary had told him she could not afford to leave him there any longer, as she had no money to pay for his keep. He said she told him she wanted the money to buy clothes, showing him her torn dress, which was all she had to wear. Elizabeth Hunter of Sunderland said she had employed Mary as a domestic servant. She said she was paid 2 shillings and 6pence per week. She had free board, food and clothing included as part of her payment. She said that Mrs. Cook often called at the house for her payment for taking care of Mary's son. On other occasions, she said Mary went to see Mrs. Cook. She said Mary would have had no money left after paying Mrs. Cook. Elizabeth said in January of 1888 Mary had gone to court to try and get the alleged father of her child, who was not named, to pay for Robert's keep. However, she had not been successful. She said after this, Mary had tried to find a farmer who she had been told wanted to adopt a child. However, she had not been able to find him, so Robert had remained with Mrs. Cook. Elizabeth said on the night of the 3rd, Mary asked if she could go and visit Robert, and she had told her that she could. She left at around 6:45 p.m. and returned around an hour later. She said when Mary came in, she warmed her hands by the fire and told her it was a stormy night outside. She said Mary didn't mention Robert in any way, and she did not have him with her. She said Mrs. Cook's house was around 10 minutes' walk away from her own home. The following morning, Elizabeth said Inspector Carter called at her house. She said Mary answered the door, but she did not hear what was said. Inspector Carter came inside and followed Mary into the kitchen. He said he wanted her to go to the police station with him. Elizabeth said she told Mary to wash her hands and go with him. Elizabeth said she then followed Mary as she went to wash and asked her what the policeman wanted her for. She said Mary told her, "I have done nothing." She said she told her, "You must have done something," and Mary replied saying, "I have just taken the child away from the woman and given it to another." She then began to cry. Elizabeth said she asked her who she had given Robert to, and Mary told her, "A woman in the street." She said Inspector Carter then came in and told Mary to hurry up. They then left together and she did not see them again. When asked, Elizabeth said she believed Mary had another child who her mother took care of, and she also paid for this child's keep. She was then asked if it was true that Mary was pregnant again, but she said she did not think that this was true. William Clark said he worked at Richardson's Mills in Sunderland. He said on the morning of the 4th of February, when he was on his way to work, he had crossed the plank over the pond near to the mill. He saw something in the water which he at first thought was a bundle of clothes. He said he had pulled the clothes from the water and found it was the body of a male child. He reported what he had found at the police station, and PC Footer came to the mill. PC Footer said he had carried the body of the child to the police station and had sent for the police surgeon to examine him. Inspector Carter said he had gone to the home of the Hunters where Mary Stockdale worked on the morning of the 4th. Again, it was not made clear why he had known to go there. He stated that he had previously known Mary from her attempt to get the alleged father of the child to pay for his keep. He said when he arrived at the Hunter's home, he had seen Mr. Hunter and told him what had happened. Inspector Carter said at first Mary had refused to go to the police station with him, but when he told her why she had to go, she replied saying, "Well, I will go then." He said when they arrived at the police station, he told Mary to go into his office. He said she spoke to him saying, "Oh dear, I don't know what I was thinking about last night. I went along towards the steps and threw him over. I must have been wrong in my mind." He said he told her to be careful what she said, and she did not say any more until he charged her with causing the death of her son. And to this she had replied yes, then shook her head and began to cry. Inspector Carter said there were some stone steps next to the pond, and it was possible that the child could have been thrown over the wall and into the pond from those steps. However, it was not possible that Robert had been able to make his own way into the water, as Mrs. Cook had told him that he was not yet able to walk unaided. Dr. Wood said he was the police surgeon at Sunderland. He said he had examined Robert on the morning of the 4th. He said Robert had a small bruise on his cheek, but there were no other signs of violence on his body. He believed that when he first examined Robert, he had been dead for between 12 and 15 hours, or from around 8 p.m. the previous night. Dr. Wood said he had also performed the post-mortem on the body of Robert Stockdale, and he found him to be a well-fed, healthy child, and it was his professional opinion that death had been caused by drowning in the pond. No further evidence was given, and the coroner, in summing up, said it was for the jury to decide if they felt that Robert had been placed in the pond by his mother Mary. If they believed this was the case, then they had no option than to return a verdict of wilful murder. They simply had to satisfy themselves that there was no other evidence about this case to induce them to return any other verdict. The jury retired for 10 minutes before returning a verdict of guilty of wilful murder, and Mary Stockdale was committed for trial. Sadly, I did not find any evidence of a funeral for Robert Stockdale. It seems clear that the father had already rejected the idea that the child was his, and with the mother in prison, it seems unlikely that anyone would have come forward to pay for the burial. So this was most likely a pauper's funeral. I imagine that Mary's mother, although possibly not looking after another child, did not have the money to help either. And it is quite unusual that a child's funeral is not covered, but perhaps the parents of Mary herself did not want the details to be known, especially if they had not been able to pay for a proper funeral. I did not find any evidence of a headstone for Robert anywhere in the area. The trial took place at Durham on February the 27th before Mr. Justice Denham. Mary, who it was said did not seem to be aware of her serious situation, pleaded not guilty to the charge of wilful murder. And as is nearly always the case, the evidence at the trial is almost exactly the same as that given at the inquest, so I will only add any new information. Dr. Wood added to his evidence by saying that he had examined Mary Stockdale. He found her to be slow, not a good learner, but he could find no evidence of insanity. William Hunter of Sunderland said Mary worked for him as a domestic servant. He stated that on the morning of the 4th of February, he had walked a little way towards the police station with Mary. He had spoken to her and told her that she had brought great trouble upon herself. He said Mary asked him, "Oh, what must I do? What must I say?" He said he told her she must tell the truth, and she replied by simply saying, "I did it." Inspector Carter added to his evidence by saying that when he had first spoken to Mary, she had refused to go to the police station with him, saying, "What me? I have done nothing." He said he asked her a second time, and she said, "No, I have done nothing, and I decline to go with you until you tell me what I have done." He said he then told her about finding Robert's body, and it was then that she agreed to go with him to the police station. The defence did not call any witnesses and spoke to the jury, stating that they must consider if, when Mary had thrown the child over the wall from the steps, she had known there was water at the other side, or if she had not been aware of this, and they must also be aware that she was not an intelligent woman and did not always know what she was doing. I did not find any evidence of the prosecution summing up, but I think we can assume that he would have asked the jury to consider the fact that Mary had taken the child from Mrs. Cook on the night of the 3rd, but had returned to her workplace without the child, and there was no evidence that she had given the child, as she had suggested, to a woman she met in the street, so only she could have thrown him into the pond. I was also unable to find any evidence of the judge summing up, and we can only assume here that he would have asked the jury to decide if they believed that Mary had thrown Robert into the pond with the intention of taking his life, or if they felt she had not clearly known what she was doing at the time and was not aware of the pond behind the wall. The jury retired for a very short time before returning a verdict of guilty of wilful murder against Mary Stockdale, but with a strong recommendation to mercy. The judge then spoke to Mary, who by now had burst into tears. He told her that she'd been found guilty of a terrible crime, and he could not see how the jury could have come to any other conclusion. He then sentenced Mary to death by hanging, and that her remains would be buried within the walls of Durham Prison. He concluded by stating that he would forward the jury's recommendation to the Home Secretary, but he did not feel that she should get her hopes up of a reprieve. Mary, who was now weeping uncontrollably, was then removed from the dock and returned to prison. However, it would seem that despite the judge's reservations, the Home Secretary had a different view of the case, and by March of 1889 a letter had been received commuting Mary's sentence to one of penal servitude for life. Mary would later be sent to prison in Aylesbury. She was never found to be insane or suffering from insanity, so she was sent to a normal prison. She was released in October of 1896, having served less than 7 years for the murder of her son. And although I cannot be entirely sure, it would seem that Mary returned to the Sunderland area, and she may even have married in around 1907. And if the person I found is the same Mary, then it seems that she died in around 1944 at the age of around 80 years. This was a very tragic story. Mary, it seems, was not able to afford to pay for the keep of her son on her small wage from her job. However, she stated that she needed the money for clothes, yet her employer said her clothes were provided for her as part of her wage. But if it was true that she did have another child, although I never found any evidence of this, then paying for 2 children really would have been too much for her. Sadly, though, it seems the only way that she could see to make her life easier was to remove poor Robert from her life. Did she really know what she was doing that night, or did she, for a short time, lose her mind and act in a moment of madness, not really knowing what she was doing? This is quite hard to believe, though, as on her return to the Hunter family home, she did not act like someone who had just murdered her child due to madness. She was calm and spoke of the bad weather, all signs that she was perfectly sane and was hiding what she had done. So what really happened here? Well, this is one that I have struggled with. I can see that Mary had a very poor wage and was trying to pay for the care of her son, but was finding it hard to do. She had talked of selling her son or finding someone to adopt him, but this hadn't happened, so she was left trying to find the money to pay for his care. So clearly she wasn't able to bring him to where she worked, which would have reduced her costs a lot. It seems to me that she acted on impulse, and perhaps she really didn't know there was water behind the wall and thought that someone else would find Robert and take care of him. However, this really wouldn't have worked either, based on how quickly the police came to her door when his body was found, so it would have quickly been known who the child belonged to, regardless of what she had done. I'd like to think that she didn't know what she was doing, as it is a much better idea than Mary simply wanting rid of her son and not caring what happened to him. She seemed to regret what happened once she was caught, but of course she simply could have been crying for herself, realising that she could now be hanged for murder. Were the jury correct to find her guilty? Well, to be fair, I don't think they could have said any other. No real evidence was found to suggest she had been insane, and she did admit to doing it. So they really did have no other choice. Her death sentence was then also the only choice for the judge. Was it right that she had her sentence commuted? Well, on this one, it's hard to say, as we don't really know what evidence was put forward to suggest that she did not deserve to die for her crime, and other than her being of low intelligence. So she was, I feel, very lucky not to have been hanged. And if she was released just a few years later, was that the right thing to do? Well, in the same way as we have today, people are often released when it's thought they have changed or felt that they have served their time. It was no different in the past, and it does seem that she never committed any further crimes after this date. But what do you think? Do you think Mary knew exactly what she was doing and simply wanted to get rid of Robert so that she could keep all her wages for herself? Or do you think she simply thought someone would find him and take care of him for her and didn't know he had gone into the pond? Do you think it was right that she was found guilty of murder alone, or should she have been found guilty but of unsound mind? Do you think it was right that her sentence was commuted, or do you think she should have been hanged for the death of her son? Do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this very sad and tragic story interesting, and I do thank you all very much for watching. And I have to say that I am glad to be back to writing and recording again, as it does help to keep my mind busy. Anyway, on that note, I do hope to see you all again next week.